what do you implicitly rules out the basis of ethnicity or language or caste, and if you have that, the registrar of parties is instructed in the Constitution, and I often used to instruct them, you don't register them as a political party longing for, eligible for elections. And I've told this to every IEBC. In fact, they've asked my advice on and then nothing happens. And they cheerfully, and nobody makes any fuss about it. That's extraordinary that this should happen. So I think, you know, we should hold people to their behavior, to the norms of the Constitution. Beyond that, I'm not sure. You know, like many other people in the room, I get very pessimistic. How do you do that? There's money given. That again is something the Constitution prohibits. So a lot of, you know, the breaches of the Constitution, of the law. Nobody seems to, you know, the people in authority do anything about it. And so I think we're in a very difficult position.
Thank you very much. We'll take 5 more, and those will be the last ones because we don't have much time. People can interact more over a beer or coffee outside. We have snacks outside. So.
Yeah. So my name is Mangala Kamenchu. I'll just take off from someone that talked about class differences, and people don't like talking about them these days. And I just wanted to ask about how you have this Article 40 that talks about private property. It talks about one cannot be dispossessed of what they own and that sort of thing. But when you look at the colonial histories of how, for instance, ancestors of the settlers bought the lands that they're in for a song, and how that actually interacted with the harbors bordering Laikipia County, for instance, and their cattle getting gunned down. Like how do you go about reconciling these class differences? How do you go about settling these historical injustices that are seemingly unable to be solved? So, for instance, willing buyer, Uhuru Kenyatta will tell you, willing buyer, willing seller. But when you look at what was at play, it was legal, but how do you go about settling that in the face of people who have nothing, people who are landless, versus people who have few families who have large tracts of land? Do we need a different moral frame of reference to speak to these things? Thank you.
Hello? My name is Andrew Franklin. I've lived here since 1981. I first met Professor Yashpal Ghai during the first CKRC Boma's Constitution, in fact, at the Nairobi Gymkhana, when the Asian communities were meeting to discuss public participation in that Constitution. I think the panelists, I think many people here would agree that, or in my opinion, the 2010 Constitution is largely moribund. How is it possible, and I say this a lot, how is it possible to think, to admit, to amend, to change a document and its subsidiary legislation enacted since the 27th of August 2010 that has not been fully implemented, either in its letter or its spirit? Even the simplest things, for example, 65(1) of the Constitution took away from non-citizens their freehold titles. I was not allowed to vote on the 4th of August 2010, but I did not oppose your Constitution because there are provisions there that I should have been given a leasehold certificate within 2 years. Now, I'm here to tell you that that individual Swazuri and the gang at National Land Commission never implemented, never regularized the transfer of freehold titles into leasehold certificates, despite putting in public notices in July and August of 2013, all of which I complied with. And Swazuri said, yes, you complied. But not many other foreigners did, and we are considering having another exercise. And that was in 2014. Why am I marginalized? Diaspora voters? Diaspora voters have not really been registered. The IABC seems to skip over that and register a few citizens in places like Rwanda. That's cool. But not in the United States. And I think the real problem here is not the Constitution. I may have disagreed with 65-1, but there were genuine requirements, there were needs to address historical injustices, not create new ones, though. And who created the new ones? A very toxic political class. My experience since the IEBC debacle
Sir, I have to stop
is
you
simply that there's nobody in those big SUVs who can be trusted as stewards of this country.
Thank you. My name is Simon Bakuya. Having been a delegate at Bomas, reconstructing this constitution, Professor Guy, my good professor, I want to thank you very much for what you did. But you remember, they even said you are not a citizen of this country because we are making a constitution. They even said that this constitution we are making, a good constitution is made during war. When there is peace, it becomes a crisis. So we have a constitutional crisis. Professor, I'm forgetting his name, not Guy, the other professor. You remember when we were chased out of Bomas, we were told we cannot continue to make the constitution. In fact, the GSU came and chased it out. All the delegates, we were told we have only 2 days to stay in a hotel. If you continue to stay in this hotel as delegates, you pay for yourselves. So we still have a constitutional crisis. You remember the provisional administration from the independence constitution. They were paid and looked after by the Queen, the provisional constitution. It has never stopped to this day. This is why we have the commissions now. So we remember that all these crises that we are doing about the constitution, we need to realize that the constitution we are talking about, the referendum and all these things, is like putting water in a sack. It will never gather. We need a polythene bag. So we need to implement this constitution, and we need somebody, another power to enforce the constitution.
Sir, I have to stop you now.
Hello? I want to make 1 or 2 comments.
Please make one.
First of all, I want to disagree slightly by our learned friends. The first problem with this constitution, it is not our constitution. Our constitution is in the Bomas draft, which was never allowed to be implemented. That was the Bomas constitution. This one was imposed on us by a committee of politicians in Naivasha that decided to introduce what you are calling a presidential system of government. I was a part of the Bomas. No delegation ever proposed a presidential system of government to the Bomas committee throughout the country, and they went around the country for years collecting views. No one in those views suggested a presidential system of government. This was a creation of a clique of politicians sitting in Naivasha and deciding how they are going to get the positions, and imposed this on us. Because the country was under the constitution, we acquiesced and accepted to have this document, but it was not ours.
Your question, please.
Thank you.
You're quite right. I don't look upon the present constitution as really a Bomas constitution. I mentioned 2 major differences. One was from parliamentary to made it into the presidential, and the other one was a much greater sharing of power at different levels, which again were taken out. And it is perhaps a commentary on politicians, if one can generalize, is that at least one very ardent supporter of parliamentary government in the meeting in Nevada voted for presidential. And I asked his friends, now, he was so active in Burma, what's happened? He thinks he might win. And therefore, it's better to be president than to be prime minister. I don't know if it's true, but it does show that politicians are very much geared, looking toward their own interests and so on. And I do think that the Burma's draft that you and we did together was one of the best things I have seen. But you know, and it went quite far. And then, of course, they went to Nevada. They made their deals, and we got something. At least the committee of experts did put their foot down at the last minute on some of the changes they wanted. But basically, I think we lost quite a lot.
I was going to suggest we just allow the two more people to ask, then we respond once. Some of the things we may not even respond.
No, I think we just
yeah.
we can interact some more outside.
Okay, so my response is, well, how people are treated at bombers. We have an opinion. Professor Mwanzi is talk about bombers. Even some of us had a lot of issues about bombers, especially with regards to the delegates who were chosen. You remember how people came in as delegates from the districts. It was hardly representative. In fact, some political parties took advantage of certain connections and recommended balance people whose agenda was not the Kenyan agenda. So I don't want us to open up Pandora's box about bombers, but nevertheless, we had also very distinguished people at bombers who also said a couple of things which were okay. But the influential voice about bombers was, and which did come out, is that mistakenly at bombers people mistook the fact that because President Moi had been authoritarian and then of course Jomo Kenyatta was authoritarian, there was a mistaken voice across bombers and across delegates that Kenya was under a presidential system. That was misinformation which caused delegates to think we should go parliamentary because they were thinking Kenya was a presidential system because President Moi and Kenyatta were. But the truth is that what was existing was not a pure presidential system. So there were a lot of lies which misled bombers. So that's my response. But with regard to the general objective, we can improve. My view is that we can improve on this document we have now, but I agree the agenda should be our Kenyan agenda rather than the political class. You have just heard that Professor Yashbak has told you one of the ardent supporters of the presidential system in Bomas moved into Naivasha and voted for this current presidential system. So what does that tell you about the politicians?
I think my opinion is that the current referendum, debate will not lead us to the bombers, it will lead us to us. So I think if we are all in agreement in that I don't see a possibility of us going to what we had that was good. But there's a lot of high likelihood that what did you say 80%? Let's say 80% that we have that is good is going to be further reduced. That's my personal submissions, looking at how this current referendum is being phrased and from where it's coming from. I have only one comment, and this is in relation, to the question on, the lands rights and what a gentleman here said about Article 65(6)(1), but is also looking at the frustrations immediately after the promulgation of the Constitution, the conflict between the constitutional entities that were supposed to, protect some of these provisions that were in the Constitution vis-a-vis the national entities. And you rightly put it, for instance, what happened, in the lands. So once again, the question is, to what extent have we really enforced this Constitution?
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Professor Ash would want to say the last word, and then we leave.
Fond as I am of constitutions, I think we shouldn't delude ourselves that just by getting a good constitution, however that one defines it, that things are going to change in any fundamental way. The Constitution is a kind of instrument, technique, opportunity to do particular things, or out of particular policies, institutions, alliances, and so on. But nothing will happen if the people who have established themselves are not interested. I mean, are we going to keep on having, Kenyatas and those kind of other, people carrying on with no regard to the values of the Constitution, but their own benefit. And enough people think, wow, he's an important man, this man. Nothing will change. Once upon a time, I was in South Africa, and some of you may know we borrowed a fair bit from South Africa. I even got some of the top people, judges and academics and so on, to talk to us here. And then I asked, some years after that, or they asked me rather, but your thing didn't work so well. Nothing much has changed. I said, you're absolutely right. And they said, well, but we done well, I mean, themselves. I said, yes, I know. I'll tell you the reason. You had Mandela, and we had whoever was at that time. And I said, it depends so much on this kind of thing. He was, even non-South Africans worshipped him. I worshipped him. I mean, somebody of his ability, generosity, appeal to the thing. And now, of course, South Africa is also beginning to get into certain difficulties. Zuma has messed up the thing a bit. But so I think a good constitution is a starting point, But I'm sure, Huru and others can keep going forever with their crop deals and this and that. And this, of course, is partly because of what I think is the ethnic factor. I've seen this in country after country. And they will take orders from their ethnic bosses. And how do we deal with all that is not easy, I think. I think we need people who go out and talk about fairness, decency, we have enough. The number of people who are starving, no clothes. One sees them every day. They're in pictures. Sometimes, you go to these informal settlement, but somehow it seems to make no impact. And I think we need to think a lot more about how we can make people more conscious. Moral values come up first, and so on. And this is not going to be done very easily.
Let me take this opportunity to thank Professor Yash, Professor Kisiang'ang'i, and Mrs. Mushimuti for agreeing to come here to talk to us. I'm sure all of us today have learned something. Personally, I've learned something new, and I hope everyone will take something home and also educate other people about all this. So let's please stand up and put our hands together for our speakers for tonight. I now would like to welcome you outside to our reception. For those of you who have time, please enjoy. And thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Yeah, it was a great.
Thank you so much. It was a
Brenda,
pleasure.
it's a great privilege being in this company.
Thank you.
Thank you, my sister.
Thank you so much for extending this invitation. Sorry?
We have dinner. Were you told?
Oh, no.
You are not told.
No, we were
You were not told?
Yeah.
Oh, I told them to say.
Yes, I was told.
Yeah, yeah.